of just gave you an introduction to what we would be talking about in chapter 1, went over the syllabus. Basically, we're just kind of taking a deeper dive into the same topics that we cover in managerial accounting, which was accounting 102, with a little bit of a stronger focus on the critical thinking piece, right? And really kind of taking the data and thinking a little bit beyond the numbers. That's kind of how I like to say it. So we get a little bit of an opportunity to do that today. We're going to go through a couple of these slides, introduce you to the example that we're going to take a look at throughout the chapter. Actually, I think it kind of extends into the next chapter too. And then I have a demonstration problem for you. And if you recall from, let me get back over here, from Monday, those are just example problems. So there I gave the PowerPoints. There's the demo problem. It's only one problem for chapter 1. The quiz is nothing more than basically terminology from the chapter that's due in a week. So you can take that anytime you want. I actually think I have those set. You can take them twice if you don't do that well on the first one. But the idea is that you're at least familiarizing yourselves with terms and some basic concepts. There would be no problem solving in those quizzes. It's, again, really strictly just terms and concepts. So, okay, any questions before I get rolling here? The textbook, make sure you do have a textbook you can share. But we do use it, so, and I will make reference to it today a couple of different times. But okay, so anyway, so chapter 1 is really just an overview of what we use cost information for, and primarily is for decision making. Then we get into like later chapters that get into more specific paths of identifying which costs we need and how we actually get those costs and the different types of reports. But this chapter is a bit of an overview. So introduced you to that on Monday, but I am going to actually kind of switch over here. I always like to look at the book. The chapters always have sort of like a beginning, opening article, entrepreneurial kind of thing. And so I like to sort of look through that before we get into the content too much, just because it provides a context for what we're covering in the chapter. And the bakery, AM Bakery, is Adam Mercer. That's his name. And that's what this little first opening article is about. So it says, I opened this bakery shortly after I graduated from a local culinary school. I've always enjoyed baking, and owning my own bakery will allow me to experiment a bit. So far, the financial returns from the store have been sufficient for me to survive. That's good, right? But I am not sure they will be enough for me to continue. I took some courses at the local community college last year, hoping to learn some business skills that will help me really take control and increase the store's value. One thing I need to do is develop a better understanding of my costs. That's where we come in, right? This semester, I'm taking a cost accounting class. I know a little bit about the subject, but I know there is a lot more to learn. I'm curious, though, how this class will help me. I need to decide whether to expand the business or fold. If I expand the business, I need some help on managing my costs and remaining profitable. I need to decide soon whether to expand or to close down and maybe go to work as a pastry chef in one of the local restaurants. So Adam Mercer is the owner and founder of the AM Bakery, which he opened 3 years ago. The bakery has been marginally profitable, but Adam knows he must make a decision soon. Should he expand the business and work on making it financially viable, or should he abandon it and look for a job baking for someone else? So it's kind of the question you want to be thinking about as we kind of progress through the topics of chapter 1, okay? And there are some financials provided on the bakery. They get reproduced in the PowerPoints, but there's some information here that comes up later on, and we'll take a look at that. But like I said, I usually pull out those financials that I want you guys to take a look at and put them in the PowerPoints. So. Okay, so this is what we ended class with on Monday. AM Bakery has been making and selling baked goods. One of the customers suggested that Adam expand and offer food, sell bakery offerings in the morning and afternoon at an office park using a food truck. So should the company expand operations? That's the question. Guess what? We don't really know, not quite enough yet to to answer that question. We need a heck of a lot more information too. Okay? All right, so we're keeping it simple, right? And for Adam, he's decided to just kind of jot down some information here about his bakery and the actions or the activities that drive the cost. So he has costs listed on the left-hand side, right? And his costs are utilities, which obviously is kind of a catch-all category, marketing, labor, and then ingredients, right? And on the right-hand side, he basically identifies what drives those costs. And we've talked about cost drivers, obviously, in managerial accounting. It's primarily what are the economic events or activities that cause us to have costs. I always use, my gasoline expense. Well, I got to drive here every day. So the miles that I drive are what drives those costs associated with me putting gas in my car, right? So for AM Bakery, the driver of utilities and marketing are the number of distribution channels that Adam has. So far, Adam only has one distribution channel. What is it? It's his small store, right? So he's potentially looking at expanding and adding a food truck, which would give him then 2 distribution. We mean by distribution channels, how you're distributing your product, right? And then the labor and ingredients costs are driven by the number of baked goods, which makes sense, right? The more baked goods he sells, the more labor required to bake the baked goods, the more ingredients he'll have to purchase in order to satisfy those additional orders. Make sense? Pretty straightforward, right? All right, so when we are evaluating such decisions, so what I want you to kind of start thinking about is we're always picking option A or B, like, choice 1 or 2. It's always going to be between at least 2 choices. I usually try to keep it simple and just say between 2 choices. What we want to focus on, because we can't get overwhelmed by numbers that really don't help our decision. So we want to focus on the numbers that are different between decisions. We call those differential costs. We also have differential revenues. So I like to give the example, if you're looking for a job and you've narrowed it down, you've had a couple opportunities, or maybe even an internship, and you narrowed it down. Think about your own experiences. You've narrowed it down to 2, and you're going to pick one or the other. What you're looking at are the things that are different between them, right? Because the things that are the same are not going to help you make your decision, internship A or internship B, or job 1 or job 2. It's the things that are different between them, right? So for example, let's just take salary. If you had 2 job opportunities, and one job was paying $60,000 and the other job was paying $55,000, that would be a factor because they're different. One pays more than the other. Now, that might not be your only factor because there may be other circumstances or other benefits like insurance and time off and distance driving to work, and all those are working hours, that may vary between the 2 options. But if the salaries are both $60,000 between the jobs, that is not going to be the criteria that you use to decide whether you're taking job 1 or job 2, because they're exactly the same. So we want to kind of drown out that extra noise. We want to focus on just what's different, because that's where the data is going to come from to help us make our decisions. Does that make sense? So definition of differential costs, these are costs that change in response to a particular course of action, and they're going to differ between your 2 options. So whether we call it option A or B, or whether we call it 1 or 2, it doesn't really matter. These are going to be that which is different. So for Adam, he's going to be looking at what are his costs with just the bakery store, and what will his costs be if he adds the food truck, and we're going to look at the differences between them, right? That's what we're going to focus on. Revenues, same idea, and I gave you that example with the salaries, right? Revenues that are different between actions. Obviously, what Adam would be hoping to do with adding a food truck is to increase his revenue, and he's going to anticipate, and he's going to estimate how much revenue he might make from having a food truck, right? So there will be a difference there with the revenues. That's the whole purpose of even considering the option. So we have this data. This comes from your textbook, and there's a lot of stuff here, so let's talk about it, okay? So this is AM Bakery, and this is a projected income statement for a representative week. So he's taking an average week, he's projecting, right? What's the problem with projecting? That's a nice way of saying estimating, but what's the problem with that?
It's not gonna be exactly what it's gonna be if it actually happens.
I mean, you know, estimates are just that, they're estimates, right? And, you know, we don't focus a whole lot in this class on, well, where in the world some of these numbers come from. You know, we have marketing research people, that's kind of their job, right? So I know I don't typically get any marketing people in this class, but I always kind of like to have one around, just because they, you know, they kind of are helpful in telling, well, how would you collect the data? How would you get this information? Now, if you were a business owner, you know, what might you look at if you're trying to estimate or anticipate what your revenues might be or what your expenses might be? Yeah, so if you can take a look at what's the averages for the industry, right? What are other companies in your industry? What are they experiencing? And those resources are out there. You know, publicly traded companies means their data is public, right? So you can go out there and maybe you know somebody, right? You can just kind of ask people that are in the industry, you know. Those estimates are not easy though to come by. Anyway, so we kind of take for granted, here they are in front of us. I like you to kind of think though a little bit about, you know, there's a lot of effort that goes into figuring these out. So, all right, so now what Adam would know is how much he's currently making on average for a week in his bakery, right? Because he's operated the bakery for 3 years, right? So that's his first column here, and it says status quo. What's status quo mean? Current situation, right? And we use that phrase throughout this chapter, or throughout this semester. Status quo is the current situation. So, current situation is that Adam just has bakery sales. And this is a really simple income statement. I hope I didn't have to review that, the income statement. Revenues minus expenses is either net income or net loss, right? And since we're not getting into like, you know, a detailed income statement, this is pretty straightforward. Sales revenue from selling your baked goods, all the costs associated with that, ingredients, labor, utilities, rent, marketing, leasing a truck. Truck lease and truck costs are not going to be in the bakery. That's what he's anticipating he'll have to add as far as expenses when he adds the food truck, right? Total cost, so, and then operating profit. So this is for 1 week, okay? That's an average week. So now he's like, okay, I gotta project, I gotta try to estimate what my income will be if I add a food truck. So that means estimating the revenues that you would earn associated with selling now these baked goods on the food truck, and the increase in your expenses, right? Making more baked goods, you're gonna, you know, you gotta buy more ingredients. You're selling more baked goods. So again, you know, where this information came from, we trust that it's a reliable source and that, you know. So he anticipates that his sales revenue will be $16,800 in an average week if he adds the food truck. And there's a little subscript right down here, 50% higher than the status quo. So basically, this number came from multiplying 11,200 times 1.5, right? Why did I say 1.5? Not 0.5. 0.5 would give me half of 11,200, and then I could add it back, right? If I just multiply by 1.5, then I can eliminate that extra step of adding back, because I'm multiplying the 11,200 times itself, 1, plus another 0.5, right? Which then gives me 16,800. You guys are going to do this a little later on in this class, so pay attention. Not for graded homework, just we're going to get warmed up, right? So the difference is, there we go, the difference is 5,600. So we want to focus, in this column, we're going to be focusing on what's different, right? And then the ingredients. Of course they're going to go up. We're making more baked goods, right? 45% higher in ingredients and labor. So 2,700 times 1.45. 3,100 times 1.45 is where we get these numbers, and here's obviously the difference between the two columns, right? And then we have utilities going up by 20%. Rent is staying the same, no additional rent required, right? Because he's not adding another store, right? But he now has a truck lease and then costs associated with the truck to operate it. And obviously, you know, I don't really know where you get a food truck, or you know, he's getting a food truck that's already equipped and all that stuff. I feel like it would be a little bit more complicated than just going around being like, yeah, I'll just lease your food truck. Like, there's not a lot of food trucks somewhere, is there? I don't know. Anyway, we've got the total cost now $11,035. So you see the difference here. He'll go from $39.75 a week on average to hopefully $57.65. So when we look at the differences, this is the differences. And in financial account, not financial accounting, managerial accounting, we've been like, okay, we're done, we found the answer. Right? But now we got to think a little bit here. So if you're Adam, is this enough information for you to be like, yep, I'm doing it?
No.
Why not?
I mean, I just.
Because if we were just making a decision based on numbers, he's going to make almost $1,800 more a week. I'd like to make $1,800 more a week. Who wouldn't, right? That sounds great. I'm not saying that the numbers don't support a decision to go ahead, but we can't just look at the numbers anymore. It's not just about the numbers. So what other questions would you ask if you were Adam? Or what other information would you seek out? Okay. Okay. So you want to look at your, like, a percentage change, right? I love that. So because we do that a lot in here. So if I want to figure out the percentage change, because people are like, oh, I only got a raise of whatever, and I would say convert that to a percentage, because it'll either sound worse or it'll sound really great, because that kind of gives you a little bit of a different perspective of what you're receiving. So if you take the difference, the $1,790, and you divide by the original amount of profits of $39.75, what's your percentage increase in profit margin or income, operating income? I keep forgetting my favorite calculator at home, so I have this awful calculator here, but I don't know why I keep forgetting it. What you got, 45? It's about 45%, right? Would you like a 45% weekly raise? I mean, I know $1,800 a week sounds like a lot, but 45, that's pretty good, right? Yes, that sounds great. Is that really what's going to happen? I don't know. So what other things are you asking? You're on the right track. What other things are you asking? Kevin, you were pretty adamant. You're like, no, that's not just enough for me to be like, yes, let's do this.
Well, I mean, I don't really have an answer. So like my managerial accounting, we stop right here, but this class we go a little bit farther.
Yeah.
No.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. Well, come on, think a little bit.
Possibly where we're gonna set up the food truck, because that's gonna depend on how many customers we're gonna get.
Yeah, I mean, it said something about a park.
Business part?
Yeah, business park, yeah. So where, right? All right, and as far as the business park goes, what questions would we need, because that's not included in here.
Do you need a permit?
Permits. Do we need permits? I mean, I'm sure we do. I know we're trying to keep it simple here, but I'm trying to think, when you start thinking about real life, yeah, permits. They're never cheap.
Who's gonna run this food truck?
Yeah, because, well, so like Adam's at the bakery, and who's driving and running the food truck? Well, in the next couple slides, we're gonna see Adam's gonna have to hire somebody, right? So, who, right? Who's helping out here? And what are you gonna pay this person? Okay, what else? That's it? Nobody else can think of anything else? Come on, guys.
So like, what are the odds you actually like sell all your?
Yeah, I mean, how reliable are your estimates of these revenues, right? And that's what I'm saying. So there has to be some kind of marketing data out there. Is there data out there that says at this time of day in this business park, 3,000 people are walking through? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, how many people are actually, what kind of traffic? And I forget, what business was that? What business is it? Oh, maybe, I don't know if it wasn't Walmart. Who is it? I would say it's Walmart, but I don't think it is. So one founder of a very successful and large company literally put his stores near traffic signals, like four-way traffic signals, where people. I want to say, who was that?
Sheets?
No, it wasn't. I mean, there is a strategy to the number of stores and locations and all that stuff. But how much traffic comes through there, right? What else? Any other unexpected costs that realistically, like, they haven't listed here?
Obviously, I guess if it's leased, you don't really have to worry about the maintenance of the truck, going through the that and gas.
But you kind of do. If you lease a car, You're responsible for the maintenance. Okay, so I know it says truck costs. I guess maybe that's the maintenance piece. I don't know. That could be, but
Probably maintenance fuel and.
maybe maintenance fuel, yeah, and maybe repairs, but that's not a very big number, right? Especially for a truck. Okay, so maybe underestimating of just those types of costs. What else? There's something up there that's not listed as a cost, and I know it's just because this is an example, but it bugs me. Can't operate a business, any business, without what? Insurance. I spent half the darn break trying to change my insurance, auto and homeowners insurance, because my policy, and I don't have any claims, was going up like ridiculous at the company that I was with, and that's no fun. That's such a pain. But I did it because I saved myself a lot of money by doing it. But what else? Anything else? Even it doesn't even have to be money related. It could be logistics. It could just be the added stress of owning and operating, this additional.
I'm gonna guess that the bakery is gonna be the one to provide all the food, because I'm doubting that the food truck's gonna be capable of making all the food in the truck, and would he be able to
I love that. That's awesome. Yes. So you're talking about, so where's the food getting baked, right? It's capacity. Capacity is also a big question here. Does the bakery, the current, and clearly we're renting the bakery, is there enough capacity to actually then to actually produce all these extra baked goods, right? That now I'm saying we're gonna be selling. So yeah, those are great questions. You got to think beyond the numbers, though, right? Beyond the numbers. All right. So what Adam is going to do is, yes, Adam is going to try to proceed with this idea, okay? And in order to help Adam out, you got to be as organized as possible. So now he's going to kind of break down his business into centers. And most organizations, whether they officially call these out by name or not, have these centers, right? And we call them responsibility centers. And we've got responsibility centers for revenues, costs, and investments. And so basically with a responsibility center, you're identifying a particular unit of your organization, and you're putting certain people of charge, and you're identifying the functions of what takes place in that unit. That's really critical, okay? And that way you hold people accountable, right? And that's always important too. So Adam is now, he's going to be the president. And he's going to hire Ed and Addie, right? Ed's going to be the vice president of bakery sales, and Addie's going to be the vice president of food truck sales. Because as someone mentioned, Adam he's one person, right? He can't be in both places, okay? What do you call this? You know what this is called? An organization chart, right? Most businesses have them. If you're not familiar with yours, go to work and ask. So you can see the organization chart. We have one here at the university. Okay, so Adam obviously goes through with expansion, and he's got 1 month worth of data now, and obviously in real life, this would be a lot more complicated. Notice that he breaks his bakery and food truck sales down. He's going to look at them by, I call it division, right? And the cost per division, and then, or channel as they call them here, and then the margin, which is just like profit margin, but just for the specific channel. And then he pulls everything together with totals, right? So you guys have seen this income statement before in managerial accounting, where we have, usually what we're used to is we're used to this total column over here. We just look at the total revenues and total expenses and the difference for the entire organization. But now we're breaking it down because we gotta look at it by unit, right? And we use it to make decisions about units, about discontinuing products, discontinuing locations. You think about, you hear store, Macy's, that's what it is. Macy's is closing a bunch of stores. The Altoona Mall, Macy's is one of the stores that's being closed. This same approach is used to determine which stores to close. Break down, Macy's Corporation is going to break down their total income statement values all by store location, and they're gonna weed out all those locations that are losing money, okay? Anyway, so you see the outcome here. We've got the bakery for the month, 18,300, contributing to total profit margin. Food truck doing okay, right? 95.25, and you can see that the total, if we just add up those two columns, we come down here. Now, we have general administrative costs that are not divided up between the bakery and the food trucks. Can anybody tell me why? It says corporate office operations, and then other, and then general and administrative costs, the total there is $8,300. And so you gotta subtract those off of this margin, and you get profit of $19,525. Someone tell me why the office operations and other general administrative costs were not divided between the two channels. Okay, exactly. Those are what we call common costs. They're common to the entire organization. And here's what's important about common costs. They typically do not get eliminated if you eliminate one of your product lines or one of your segments. We call them segments too. They're calling them channels in this book, whatever, the same thing. So they're common to the entire organization and are not necessarily eliminated when you eliminate a segment or a channel or a product, right? So that's why we're not dividing them up between the two. Now, does that mean that we never divide them up between the two? Well, not necessarily. And later on in the semester, when we try to calculate the unit cost of something, those are still costs that I have to incur to run my business. So they still factor into every unit of product that I sell. So I will have to factor them in if I'm trying to come up with a unit cost for things, right? But I'm not doing that right now. I'm just looking at my total income statement and how things are getting distributed. You guys have questions so far? Okay. And these were just notations. So here we have A is labor, B is channel margin, C is corporate office operations. A includes channel manager salaries but excludes the president's salary, right? So that labor is not the president's salary. His salary is going to be down here somewhere. The difference between revenues and costs attributable to a specific channel. Obviously, that was the definition of channel margin. And then corporate office operations, that does include Adam's salary. Now, why is Adam's salary not here? Because Adam is the president of the entire company. Just like Father Malachi is the president of the university, if the university decides to eliminate a school, not our school, of course, eliminate a school, the Father Malachi's salary doesn't go away. He's still going to make what he makes, right? So his salary is common to the university, not to a particular school or department, if that makes sense, okay? All right, so I'll just make sure that. And now we have a budget. Why do we have budgets? And why do we compare our budgeted numbers to our actual results? This is an unrealistic budget, but we'll get to that.
We use budgets to try to predict like how much money how much we'll spend, and we compare it to see how accurate our predictions were, so we can maybe try to guess better next time.
Perfect. Yes, that's exactly why we have budgets. Now, budgeting is challenging though, right? And we've talked about budgeting in other classes. Even if you didn't have me, I'm sure you went over budgeting techniques. The thing about a budget is it's not something that you sit down and you create one time and you never look at it again. You just wasted all of your time, right? Budgeting is an ongoing process. And as soon as you have information that's different from what you put in your budget, you got to go update your budget again, right? Like it's a constantly changing thing. And so, creating this budget, this elaborate plan, and then not updating it as information becomes available, you've just wasted a bunch of time. It's not going to serve its purpose. What's unrealistic about this budget is everything works out just perfectly, right? Notice the budgeted, well, except for expenses, but budgeted revenues don't change from the actual. That's not realistic, right? Total ingredients are off a little bit. That's more realistic, right? Because we can't always predict what the market's going to do, what grocery prices are going to do, right? Anybody that owns a restaurant can be very frustrating, right? And what don't you like, especially for products whose prices change pretty frequently? What's the frustration for a bakery or any restaurant owner when it comes to food prices? So they struggle to pay for it, right? The ingredients or the food that they're serving you, they could pass those costs on to you. Well, what's the struggle there? Especially if stuff fluctuates a lot. Ian?
I was just saying, like, if restaurants raise their prices, like, people won't buy it.
Exactly, and so you can't raise as a restaurant, I mean, I guess you can, but like to raise your prices every time your cost goes up, you know, like people notice, right? You know, people know, especially when they come out, like you go somewhere where you go a lot and like the menus are all kind of grody and old and all of a sudden you got a new menu. You know why there's a new menu? Because there's probably new prices on the menu. And then like you get another new menu a few months later and you're like, wait a second, you know. I mean, what were you, I saw you had your hand up. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. You can't just every time, you know, a cost fluctuates for you because it's likely that cost is going to come back down again, right? So when you have costs that are kind of still hovering, you know, chicken is kind of like chicken wings, right? Oh, you know, if you think about some places what they charge for a dozen of wings and how that price, if you pay attention to that sort of thing, right? You tend to pay attention more when you teach and you talk about this stuff, but it's hard. You don't want to always just your first inclination shouldn't be to automatically pass some small increase on to your customer. You got to see if you can absorb it somewhere else, and you know that can be challenging. Like, where can I cut costs that I'm not always passing my increases on to my customers, because your customers are going to not want to buy from you anymore, right? That's kind of what happened with my insurance. Actually, I'm like, I'm over this. Like every time I get a new premium, my premium's going up. I didn't even do anything. There's nothing's changed, you know. Anyway, so you guys are familiar with budgets, and you know, comparing your budgeted amounts to your actuals. The difference, though, is what we're focusing on. I'm back to the difference column, right? The differential. Are all of these individual differences? Are these all red flags? Do you think for this individual? Because you're not going to have. I mean, it's very unlikely that you're going to budget perfectly every time, right? You're always going to have differences. But do I have time to focus on each one of these necessarily? I mean, any of these with the ingredients, except for maybe the fruit might be off a little bit, but again, you might want to look at that as a percentage, right? You were off a good bit there. They could just be temporary market conditions. You know what I mean? I mean, and again, you might not do a lot of grocery shopping, but I've been to the store and ahead of, cauliflower costs $7, and then like 2 weeks later, it's $3. Or eggs. Eggs is a big one. Everybody's always complaining about eggs, right? We go through a lot of eggs in my house. We all eat a lot of eggs. Well, you know, yes, I understand that sometimes they're like, you know, $2.99, and next week they're like, and depending on the kind you buy, right? But they're like $4.99, and you're like, what the hell? And now the bird flu. So you got the bird flus out there, and so now they're talking about how egg prices are going to go up, right? Because of the bird flu. And we ride this out a little bit, and then next thing you know, egg prices will start coming down. It just, you know, so you want to try to ride out certain things, certain market fluctuations, certain economic conditions. But it's challenging. It's not easy to do. Okay. That's what I wanted to mention there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pause here. You guys are going to get your notebooks out and your pencils and your calculators, and you're going to take a look at this problem. And we're going to do it together. I'm going to help you get set up. So we have Jim, and he's a florist. And he owns or runs Bountiful Flower Shop. I don't know why this isn't embracing. This board needs cleaned. Okay. And his typical monthly operating results include the following. So we have sales revenue, flower costs, supplies, labor, utilities, rent, and other. So what I set you up for, if I go back to the PowerPoint, is really the same setup that AM Bakery had, which was the basic income statement. I'll even go as far as to say here. Right, so we had the status quo, we had an alternative, and then we had the difference. We want the exact same thing for Jim's florist. We want a status quo column, an alternative, and a difference column. Right, now our revenues and costs might not, obviously aren't identical, because we're talking about baked goods here and Jim's selling flowers, so we have a little difference in the cost classifications or names, right? But we are going to basically prepare an income statement, and we're going to show the differential revenues and expenses. So it says, Jim recently attended a trade show. Does everybody know what that is? What's a trade show?
Basically a whole bunch of, industries come together, well,
Yeah,
everybody in the
mostly
industries.
everyone's selling flowers at a
Flowers,
trade
yeah.
show, right? Every kind of, okay. And he was attracted by a national chain, like, 1-800-Flowers or something. That's the only one I could think of. I don't even know if that's a real chain. But anyway, they offered him referral service, baskets and new flower arrangements in exchange for a monthly licensing fee of $1,000. So tell me what that means.
Basically the chain's gonna be referring people to his store, but in exchange, he has to pay him $1,000 a month.
Right, so it's an opportunity for a national chain to refer people to Jim's store, right? So if you go online and you want to buy flowers for somebody, and you put in your location at 1-800-Flowers, maybe Jim's store comes up first, right? And Jim's store might not have come up, before, but he's got to pay for that service. It's not free. So it's $1,000 a month. Okay. So he figures that the additional business from referrals will increase his revenues by 40%. Flower, material, supplies, and labor costs will also increase by 45%. Utilities will go up by 10%, other costs by 20%. Rent will not change as he will still use the same facility. Number 1 says, should Jim expand his business to be associated with a national chain? Support your answer. Number 1 is just a numbers question. So we need a status quo column, which means what? The current situation, okay? We need the alternative, which is with the national chain. And then the third column just highlights the differences, right, between the two. And down the left side, this is where I put my income statement information. So we've got sales revenue, and then we have costs, and I'll list them out here for you so you guys have them. Flowers, supplies, labor, utilities, rent. We've got to throw the licensing fee in there, even though it's not the current status quo, it will be. The alternative, so then we have total costs. Oh no, I'm sorry, we have other costs. We always tend to list those last, by the way. So then total costs, and then operating profits. And how do we find operating profits?
Take sales, also subtract all the expenses.
Yeah, so look, your sales revenue minus your total cost is going to give you your operating profits, right? So let's do the status quo column first. I'm going to give you a second to do that. Take what's currently happening for Jim, and someone tell me how much money Jim makes every month from selling flowers. $980. Anyone else get $980?
Yeah.
All right, so that's just to make sure. So sales revenue, 4,000, right? And then we have flowers, we're 800. I'll try to line this up as best I can, but you know how this is. 300. Labor was 600. 250. 720. Licensing fees, other costs. Hope Jim has another job.
Still living out the
You might be sleeping in the back room with the flowers, right? All right, so does everybody understand where I got my totals and my operating profit? Total revenue of 4,000 minus expense of 3,020, 980. All right, so now with the national chain, if he decides to go with the national chain, he's going to increase his revenues by 40%. Flowers, materials, supplies, flour, materials, supplies, labor by 45. So I need you to do the next column and see what we get. Give you a minute to try that. See, I like to do my calculations kind of like right in the middle here. It says that revenues are going to increase by 40%. So if I take 4,000 times 1.4, right? I should get my new number, which is 5,600, and that's a difference between the two of, that's a positive number. That's good, right? Okay. Well, we don't know everything yet. And then it says that flour, supplies, and labor all increase by what? 5%. I like to do my math right there so you can see where the numbers are coming from, right? So flowers are now going to be 1,160, right? 435 for supplies. Labor is going to be 870, okay? How much are utilities going up by? 10%. Okay, yep. Rent stays the same. The licensing fee is 1,000. And other expenses go up by 20%. So when we add up all of our expenses, what do they come out to? 4880. Excuse me. Revenues of 5,600 minus expenses of 4880 gives Jim operating profit of blue. Okay, so then I focus my attention on the difference column, and I just do the difference between each, right? The difference between 800 and 1160 is 360. The difference in supplies is 135. Additional 270, 25, 0, right? 1,000 and 70. And that difference is 1860, right? So look, we have 1,600 of additional revenue, but we have 1,860 of additional expense. So that is a reduction. And that does explain. The 980 down to 720 is a difference of 260, isn't it? Okay. So just looking at the numbers, no critical thinking here. Does Jim go with the national chain? No, it's a no-brainer, right? Do we stop at that though? Does Jim just give up? Okay, well, I guess that depends, right? So I have a question. Well, let's read number 2. It says, if Jim can negotiate a different term with the national chain, what licensing fee makes him indifferent between the two choices? If he were to be indifferent, what would this number have to be? Yeah, so for him to be indifferent, the difference has to be 0. What number is that?
The licensing fee would have to be
740. Yeah. So if the licensing fee was 740, his operating profit would be 0 because then his total cost would be the same as he's currently experiencing, right? Does Jim want to be indifferent? So, there is a component here to where Jim has to say to himself, do I want to try to negotiate? a better contract price for myself. The other thing you have to remember is that these are estimates. Is there any guarantee the gym's revenues are going to increase by 40%? No, that's probably more unknown or more difficult to figure out than the rest of this stuff, right? He's trying to figure out how many new orders of flowers he would get. So if you were Jim, what would you do? And there's no right or wrong answer here.
I would try to negotiate.
Would you negotiate?
Yeah, try to get like 500.
500? Okay. That would give you a little extra cash, right? Every month, based on your estimates. I think I could live with that. Anyone else have any ideas? If it's not worth it, perhaps shop around.
See if they can offer you a bigger increase in revenue.
Yeah, so you might be getting some. That's a great idea. Offer, you're getting. I don't know how much Jim's getting. It says his revenues will increase by 40%. He's obviously getting some kind of a cut, right? Maybe negotiate a higher cut of the revenues, because he's the one that's still paying for all the supplies, right? He's still the one that's got all the costs. It's not like the national chain has absorbed any costs. They're just drumming up business for Jim. We kind of do the same thing here at the university. Like we used to pay outside. I don't know what the exact word is, but they would give us students. They would get us students mostly for our MBA programs. They were referral services, I guess that's the right word. And we would pay them a hefty fee. And you gotta figure out, is it worth it, right? Okay, thank you guys. We will pick up with this on Friday. We're gonna wrap up chapter 1 on Friday already. And you will have graded assignments that I will give you time in class to do. So bring notebook, paper, calculator, and a pencil.
Thankfully the roads weren't all bad up here coming up here. But I guess it is mid-afternoon.
It was worse last night because it was starting to snow a little bit, and then have a good job.
You too. Thank you.
Well, it was news for me.